Hello, my name is Dr. Laurel Trainor, and I'm the director of the McMaster Institute for Music and the Mind and the LIVELab. I'd like to welcome you to the premiere of our new documentary series called The Art of Science. We'll take a look behind the scenes and into the minds of our researchers and artists to discover the stories behind some of our LIVELab research studies. This first episode focuses on the coordination of music and dance. It features behind-the-scenes footage, interviews with industry professionals, and an exciting look into the motion capture process we use to investigate the synchronization of dancers across various music and staging conditions. This episode will also feature a full dance performance by Amanda Damaren and Seana Williams, choreographed by Dr. Henry Daniel, and featuring the music composed by Emily Wood. We hope you enjoy this new series and stay tuned for more episodes.
The LIVELab is one of the most incredible, flexible research spaces in the world. We bring in professional performers, and we're interested in researching how they communicate with each other, how they maybe communicate with the audience or take in what the audience is giving back to them. There really is no other place in the world that can do that kind of research.
On this study, we're looking at how dancers coordinate. So we're measuring two dancers who each learned a beautiful 5-minute choreography by Henry Daniel. They learned it on their own, and now we have them come together and they have to dance it together. And we see how do they have to change and how do they have to adapt to each other. The main measure is motion capture. So that gives us exquisite access to the minute movements that they're making throughout their dancing. And so with that measure, we can get a very fine-grained analysis of how well they're moving together. But it also gives us another measure, which is how they're communicating with each other.
I've always approached interactive technologies as a way of exploring particular kinds of architectures. So it is a research project, and whether they were with scientists or electronic artists, I'm always curious about what this process can teach me about my own work.
It has many different moving parts, as you can imagine. Not only do we have the performers, but we have several members on the team. So the team is actually quite large. While it is a research study, we also aim for it to be an actual performance as well. So we have a professional choreographer, professional dancers, and researchers involved in the study from the beginning and the end to design it all. One of the greatest challenges has been capturing their movement while still being able to figure out where to place the markers on them.
Human movement is more complicated than we imagine. You need to put a little bit of science to know where to start from. So we don't need to just analyze everything. We want to find some key variable in this whole thing that will be informative and will tell us about how the two dancers are coordinating with each other. I have to help them to see how much they can record, how many markers we'll need, even just the area where they could move, if that's something that they need to take into account. There's a lot of preparation involved in setting up the cameras. Here we have an object that we need its dimension, so it's useful when we calibrate the system. See inside it, it's a camera. It has a lens from one of the popular makers. But this is an infrared filter, and what this camera sees is infrared light reflected from these markers. It's a little bit like GPS, so think of these as satellites, and you have a few of them from different angles. When you combine the information from each one, together you get the 3D location of the individual markers. For the dancers, we just use straps to put a few of these on their hands, wrists, shoulders, head, etc. on their body, so that we can track individual parts of the body. So we had to find new ways to arrange the markers so that the dancers can freely move and roll around without hurting themselves.
Balancing the artistic aspect and the research of that is a very fine balance. Sometimes we have to make some sacrifices, whether it be on the research end of things or on the artistic end, but the goal at the end of the day is to mesh them together in a way so that they complement each other.
making sure that there's a balance between, what you might call ecological validity, or, making it into a real artistic performance as opposed to just an experiment. That has been one of the biggest challenges that we've faced in our research since the beginning. To do the kind of control that you want for science kind of takes us away a little bit from the art.
When we want to study something in the LIVELab, we try to do it in as naturalistic a way as possible. So in this study that we're doing right now on dance, they're dancing on a stage, they're doing, real performances. But at the same time, just the fact that we're measuring things in them is probably changing a little bit how they might otherwise behave. So we try to mitigate by getting them very used to the markers. If any marker is uncomfortable, we try to see if we can reposition it, let them warm up with it, and so on. But on the other hand, it won't be exactly the way that they would behave if we weren't actually studying them. And so we're always trying to have it as naturalistic as possible, but we need to have some experimental control or we can't ask our scientific questions. I love working with artists. When I work with other scientists, we tend to get into the real nitty-gritty of things and the mathematical equations. But when you work with an artist, you take a step back and you start to think about what does it really mean to be a human being? And the way the artist approaches it, they may have very similar questions to a scientist, but they approach it in a different way, and it's very enriching.
Working with scientists has been great. It's nice to work with people that are so passionate about what we do and going deeper into the work, the choreography, talking more about, what we feel while we're up there and getting a deeper look into the movement itself.
One of the things that we were worried about originally was how we would even be able to get the motion capture markers on the dancers. And we were worried that they'd be falling off when they're rolling, or that it would be too painful for them because they'd be putting too much pressure on one marker and it would hurt.
At first it was challenging just to understand how to work with them, especially we have a lot of floor work. So it was us learning how to adapt quickly, but as dancers we're so quick at adapting. If things hurt or if things are bothering us, it's an automatic, okay, well what can we do in the choreography to fix it for ourselves? But with the assistance of everyone, we were okay. Moving, we could find pathways with the markers on us. We could find different areas of connecting with the markers, which was cool.
If anything, it was exciting, getting suited up every day. I've never really had that experience before where internally I'm actively thinking, okay, where is my hand tracing the floor and what is this going to look like, when we see the footage. You think deeper about these lines that you're creating and these sort of patterns. And so that was different than anything I've ever experienced. I felt like, these past 3 days, there's been this sort of energy, this buzz of excitement, because we all got to join together, collaborate, and dive deeper into what we do. And it's so exciting to learn more.
You don't see this every day, scientists wanting to understand dancers. I think that this is very important for all artists, not just dancers.
So it came about when we were planning our neuromusic conference, and we started chatting about how would different types of music affect how our dancers are communicating with each other. For our experiment, we wanted some things to be controlled about the music. So for instance, when I was composing, I was listening to a metronome, which usually I wouldn't do as a composer. And also for our experiment, we were interested in the effects of a note density. So how many notes there are in the music, how that would affect the dancers. So it was very different than any other experience I've ever had. So I recorded them here in the LIVELab on the disc lavalier, and I was pretty open. So I guess my approach in composing is that I take an improvising approach. I guess like I have a jazz degree, so I kind of start playing, oh, I like that idea, and I take that and develop it into something more. I had no idea what was going to come when I arrived here. I was more interested in getting the right mood, so getting like the emotion, right? So that's what I let guide me when I was coming up with the music.
We have a condition in which they dance together with no music, and then we have 2 music conditions. But in the one case, it's very sparse, so there's not very many notes. And in the other case, it's much more dense, so there's many more notes. Our hypothesis is that when there's more notes, there are more auditory cues to tell the dancers when they should be moving, and that it will be easier to synchronize with each other when the music has basically more information in it.
The more information you have in terms of timing, the more notes. It's like getting signposts on the highway. When they come every 1/10 of a mile, you have a pretty good idea when the next exit is. When they only come every 5 miles, you're wondering. Same thing happens with auditory rhythm information. So the denser, busier piece of music we think should lead to a little better coordination among the dancers.
There was something about the dance condition that made us connect emotionally together. It was a totally different effect, and I think the audience felt that as well. Girl. that was the one. That was the most, that flow. Yeah.
A study like this, we learn about how people communicate non-verbally. So not just dancers, not just performers, but we all use a lot of non-verbal communication. This gives us some insight into the cues that we take from each other, whether it's our body language, our facial expressions, all kinds of things.
We're constantly aware of how we're interacting with other people in synchrony. Music is a special case, because in music and also in dance, often we're synchronous with the other person. So we're singing at the same time they are, or we're dancing at the same time. And this is probably why we have music and dancing at weddings and at parties and basically any situation in which we want to feel a common bond with other people, we move in synchrony with them.
I think about finding synchrony and dance is so important just to know like what is crucial about being human, like how did we evolve this way? Why is it that we're so drawn to dancing with other people? Why is it that we're so drawn to doing music with other people? There's something like fundamentally human about it.
You don't see this every day. Scientists wanting to understand dancers. I've never even thought that it was possible to get down so deep into it. It's given me a huge perspective on how I can now push myself to look at dance differently.
And this study has shown that we all have a unique quality in the way that we move, the way that we breathe. And I think sometimes it's easy for people to forget how special and how unique they really are. And so when studies like this happen and you get to collaborate with another dancer, it wasn't about comparing myself to Seana, but it was really about celebrating each other's strengths and supporting them in that. So I think that's so important to remember that even if you're different from someone, it doesn't mean that you're better, it doesn't mean that you're weaker, it doesn't mean anything, it just means that you're you. And how important that is to just go out in the universe and rock that every single day.